WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're over the other edge. We have a new world champion, and I wore red today for the Kansas City Chiefs and our friends at Coons Baltimore Ford. Dennis, you'll be here on Thursday from 3 until 5. We are doing tons and tons of Super Bowl Radio Row throwbacks. I guess we have Jerome Bettis and Johnny Cochran. Who knew Johnny Cochran was on my show? He was. Deacon Jones, a lot of the dearly departeds, and a comedian Louis Anderson, amongst others this week. But we are doing some normal sort of will Lamar be here radio, and will they ever sign an offensive coordinator? And lo and behold, Luke Jones, turns out Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was any doubt before Super Bowl Sunday, and certainly wasn't a doubt on at 10:30 at night on Sunday night as Kansas City completed a second half comeback. And look, we've talked so much here in Baltimore about Lamar Jackson. Buffalo loves Josh Allen. Cincinnati loves Joe Burrow. Philadelphia loves Jalen Hurts. All of these guys are still chasing Patrick Mahomes, and I'm still not sure it's all that close, quite frankly. He's the best in the league. He's been the best in the league for a few years. The ceremonial passing of the torch is complete now with Tom Brady having ridden off into the sunset earlier this month.
He even took a fall for Brady and let Brady have one last act out before he goes and wins 4 of these, right?
He did.
Right?
Well, it didn't help that his offensive line fell apart, but the difference in Sunday night's matchup compared to them playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a couple years ago was how terrific their offensive line was. I mean, we've talked so much about the Philadelphia pass rush and all these guys with double-digit sacks. They didn't drop Mahomes once. They ran the ball really well, whereas Philadelphia, for as well as Jalen Hurts played and as well as they played in that first half, they couldn't get into their running game the way that they would have liked to with a 10-point lead at one point in time, or a 10-point lead at halftime, quite frankly. So I think you just look at that. These were the two best teams. I think we had kind of established that going into Super Bowl 57, but we got a great football game. A lot of talk about the last hold, and even though James Bradbury said after the game he held him. Now the threshold there as far as a call, people will debate, and certainly it was made the ending a little more anticlimactic, but by and large, we got a great football game. And the bad news for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson or not, the bad news for the Bengals and for the Bills and the Chargers and whoever else you want to talk about in that AFC is Patrick Mahomes is going nowhere. Now, Andy Reid, how much longer he's going to keep doing this. And, there was even a report earlier in the day on Sunday that maybe this would be it for him if he won. After the game, he seemed to downplay that possibility. We'll see what happens, but Patrick Mahomes isn't going anywhere, and he's the gold standard in the NFL. And he reiterated that on Sunday night with what was a really good performance. Didn't put up the eye-popping passing yardage, but they made the plays when they needed to. And their offensive line did a fantastic job opening running lanes and certainly giving him time in the pocket. And they really neutralized that Philly pass rush. And on the flip side, Kansas City, for as much as we don't talk about their defense, or when we do, it's usually in negative terms. They did a heck of a job in the sense of, okay, they gave up points, but you look at the way that Philadelphia had to grind. They put them into 18 third downs. They put them in the 2 fourth down situations. And the Eagles did a great job with that. Take nothing away from them.
Until they kicked the field goal.
Yeah, but the point is Kansas City made them grind it out in a way that they don't like to. Typically with Philly, they got the explosives in the passing game the way they like, and then it's run the ball and run the ball and run the ball some more. They never really got into that. And I mean, really, their entire running game was really Jalen Hurts. I mean, Sanders and Gainwell, I mean, they just didn't get much from them. So it really was a collective effort. You always hear it was a team effort after a big win, right? That's kind of the stock answer. But you look at what Kansas City did offensively in the second half. You look at what their defense did in the second half, and they even got the big punt return that set up a touchdown for them. I mean, it really was all 3 phases in that second half where Kansas City, they played close to a perfect game in the second half, which they needed to when they're down 10 points at halftime. So they ultimately deserved a win. Take nothing away from the Eagles, and I thought Jalen Hurts one disastrous fumble aside, he was terrific. But ultimately, I think the team that won deserved to win on Sunday night. And again, even the underwhelming, controversial ending aside with the holding call on third down, I think you have to tip your cap to the Kansas City Chiefs. They deserved it.
Yeah, the holding call will stick in your craw, right? Like that was certainly for a league, it's on brand, right? You know that the Super Bowl gets decided on this,
Yeah.
and the kid said he held them, right? And there's a piece of jersey, but then I even saw like Brandon Stokely was out on Twitter, and there's an offensive guy saying that's not holding. You know what I mean? So I think when wide receivers are making that case, I think it is a controversial call. It's like for the word controversy in a Super Bowl in a situation pretty controversial. I mean, the game changes on that call, period.
My best friend, however, texted me right after the game ended, and he made such a cogent point at that moment in time. He said it really puts into perspective how fortunate the Ravens were at the end of Super Bowl 47 that Jimmy
Oh,
Smith was not flagged in a not the same exact situation, but a similar situation. And you really think about it in those terms. I mean, think about if
I
he
was
gets
waiting
flagged
for the
there. I mean,
flag that night in New
yeah.
Orleans. I mean,
So
I was like, that flag's coming because it looked wrong. The bodies moved the way flags go, right? Literally.
I mean, it really just comes down to these are borderline calls. I mean, you said it was controversy, and it's controversy because social media makes it controversy, right? Every single call we look at, we say, "Oh my gosh, that was terrible," or people say,
Well, I
"Oh,
think down
that
the middle, you literally would find in a room of 10 people, 5 people to say
sure,
it's enough and 5 people to say it wasn't enough.
sure." And as I noted, I was watching it with some of my family members. You look at the threshold for defensive holding, pass interference, offensive holding, all those different calls that, as much as we try to take the subjectivity out of it, there's subjectivity. There's always going to
Dude,
be.
let me tell you what, it really got harder for me to watch basketball as it got more physical and I got older because it felt like hand checking and it felt
Yeah.
like fouling. You know what I mean? What was a foul and what's hand checking is, that got very, very cloudy in the Big East, especially in the last 2 minutes of a game where like how the game's officiated and most of my more esoteric, controversial friends that love strategy and officiating, they'll sit and talk about who the home plate umpire is. And I know when
Yeah.
I would sit around and drink beer with Mike Messina, he was very affected. And Jim Palmer in every single, I mean, we're talking balls and strikes. We're talking every single play of the game, right? And I guess officiating is, I just went from basketball to baseball to football there through 31 years of doing this for a living and saying at the end of any Duke Maryland game that was a 2-point game, there's always a foul. But in an NFL game, in a Super Bowl game, on that play out in space, there should be some letter of the law as to what it is.
Well, but there isn't because there's subjectivity. I mean, a ball or a strike, especially now with K zone and how it feels baseball's moving closer and closer to
But
that, and
it's
it feels
different
like
for Fetty Patek than it is for Dave Winfield, right?
it is. But my point is, you're never going to eliminate the controversy. I don't care how good the official is because all of these calls have subjectivity. I guess my gripe with the call would be if that's the threshold for defensive holding, you could probably call that a total of, I don't know, 10 to 12 times between both teams, right? Between both defenses. So again, do I think the call was blatantly missed or kicked or anything that was terrible, or probably not. But I will say this, the way that game played out, I would have loved to have seen Jalen Hurts have a minute 30 there, or whatever the time would have been at the time. I can't recall off the top of my head, but some time to have a legitimate 2-minute drive there to either try to tie the game and send it into overtime, because it would have been a field goal had there not been a flag there, assuming Butker would have made it, which probably shouldn't make that assumption based on the miss he had earlier in the game. But a chance to either tie the game or to win it there. Instead, we got a field goal with just a few seconds left and a Hail Mary, and that was it. But again, I think even some of the most passionate Philadelphia fans out there who didn't like the call, they would also say, well, Jalen Hurts fumbled a ball and Kansas City ran it back for a touchdown. We didn't move the ball quite as well in the second half. We gave up a long punt return. So there are plenty of plays that you can point to and say in the second half, Kansas City did what they needed to do in every phase. Philadelphia came up a little bit short in some ways. So, I mean, it really just comes down to Kansas City was the better team in the second half after Philly had largely dominated in the first half. And when it comes down to a third down like that, and it's going to be a tight call, a borderline call. I mean, the very definition of a borderline call in any of these sports you just mentioned, the benefactor is going to like it, and the team that it comes up on the short end, they're not going to like it. So, how do you improve that? And that's not to say that I don't think officiating should be better, because it certainly can be better, and there's certainly things they can do. But when you do get to those subjective calls, I mean, you're not going to make it perfect because these are not, it's not as simple as is the foot on the sideline or not. You know, we're talking, or how many different what is a catch kind of scenarios did we have on Sunday night's game? So, you know, you're always going to have some level of question, some level of debate, and some level of controversy. But again, in the end, Kansas City made more plays in Philadelphia after intermission, and that was the difference in the game.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on the social media thing. And of course, the Orioles starting spring training. The Ravens will hire an offensive coordinator at some point. We're going to be doing a whole bunch of Radio Row Best of stuff around here and some great conversations, including Luke with the great Diamond Dallas Page, which hasn't aired around here in about 6 years. So you'll hear that and see a lot of that stuff at Baltimore Positive as well. We're getting the Maryland Crab Cake Tour, putting the band back together. The Maryland Lottery, our friends at Window Nation. We have some new sponsors coming in as well. Very excited about that. That's going to be March 3rd. We're going to be at Drug City. My dear friend Calvin Statham is going to be coming out. We're going to hook up the piano and have some fun with him, as well as on March the 8th, we're back at Fadley's down in Lexington Market, the old market. The new market's open. The old market's still there with Fadley's in it. So we'll be telling you more about that as we roll all that out. Big appreciation to the Maryland Lottery celebrating 50 years. And our friends at Window Nation, 866-90-NATION. Make sure you give them a call. You buy two, you get two free. 24 months, 0% financing. And I know it hasn't been snowing or cold or awful, but like the windows have been a differentiator for us here this winter, especially for the cat looking out the window at trying to eat all the birds and squirrels and all that good stuff. All right, so Luke, full disclosure, anybody follows me on social media knows that had some delicious food at Costas on Saturday night, had some seafood. Then Sunday night, one of our newest sponsors, Hollywood Casino, right up in Perryville. A lot of folks know about it, but they've done a ton of work up there. They have that great lodge going in, and the Barstool Sports Restaurant, which is kid-friendly. So it's like the restaurant, it used to be an old Green Turtle. It's tricked out. It's big screen TVs. Great place to watch the games. It was like awesome. Big bands played there. Clips played there the other night with Farouk and Journey. So we go up to Barstool, signed some books, left some Purple Rain up there. A lot of Ravens, a lot of Eagles fans too. A lot of hooting every time the Eagles did something great. So we left at halftime, right before halftime, because we were trying to get back home, watch second half. My wife DVR'd Rihanna, all that stuff. We were listening in the car. So I put 105.7 The Fan on, and Westwood won and Kevin Harlan. So Kurt Warner's calling the game. So coming back, and at halftime, they cut out of Rihanna for the 12 minutes. They played the beginning of her tape because that's all she played was a tape anyway. Super Bowl half. It's another story altogether. We'll get to that next time. Next time I have a pass on Radio Row after 28 years, I'll go back and take that one on. But they played a 10-year anniversary, a 4.5, 5-minute vignette of Super Bowl 47. And it was this game, the Kelsey brothers are playing each other back 10 years ago. Coaches. So they go back, and it's a lot of John and a lot of Ray and Rat Piss on Cotton and like all, stuff, right? And when it ended, it was, Jack Harbaugh's voice is in my car. I'm driving through Falston, like I'm in White Marsh, and there's John and Jim Harbaugh's voice in my car. And it was kind of weird because it sounded like it was a call in. It was just kind of like a weird audio. But when it ended right around like Bel Air Road as I'm getting back onto the Beltway. And I thought to myself, wow, it's been 10 years. And I thought John might be going to the Hall of Fame, right? And maybe Jim goes to the Hall of Fame as a player, coaches a couple Super Bowls. He's now in college la la land, 10 years gone, right? Always trying to get back in. Denver didn't want him. I don't know what the temperature would be or what the price would be at $15 million a year for Jim Harbaugh to be the coach of the Detroit Lions at some point. But it seems to me
Mm-hmm.
it's bound to happen. But these coaches, Andy Reid hit the threshold for me, right? When he walked out and the confetti was flying in the red, he's going to the Hall of Fame. It's 4 Super Bowls now, 2 in. Disciples like Harbaugh have won Super Bowls under him. John Harbaugh's got an uphill climb for Hall of Fame now. I mean, and he's a youngish enough guy, and he may go run the Jaguars for 15 years when this is. I don't know. There's always that second life that you don't see because I don't know that anybody saw Andy Reid going to Kansas City and being there 10 years and going to 3 Super Bowls and getting this wonder kid. And now we're talking about him retiring and Eric Bieniemy and like all of that. But I think the Andy Reid for Hall of Fame thing, after listening to the Harbaugh thing from 10 years ago and thinking about Mike Tomlin won 5 minutes in. Now, Mike Tomlin's got a hell of a resume because he's never had a losing season. So that's kind of a weird thing for him.
Mm-hmm.
But all of these guys, Sean Payton's trying to go back and get a gig. There's a little immortality for all of these cats chasing. And I don't know. I mean, Belichick, obviously. Belichick's won them all. But who else? Andy Reid's next.
Yeah, and I mean, in all honesty, I think Andy Reid was already in, but this cements it, right? I mean, it's not even a debate anymore that Andy Reid belongs in. And it is incredible when you think, as much as we talk about the longest tenured coaches, certainly Belichick starting in 2000 with New England, and Tomlin in 07, Harbaugh in 08, Pete Carroll a couple years after that in Seattle. But Andy Reid didn't take any time off. He was fired from Philadelphia after the 2012 season, and he's a Chiefs coach. What, a few days later? I mean, it was a rapid hire there, and for him to do what he's done now for almost a quarter century, right? I mean, this will be what, his 25th year as a head coach coming up, assuming he returns. But it's impressive, and I think for me, you just watch what he's done, and look, he's reached these latest heights. He's got Patrick Mahomes. But let's keep in mind, Patrick Mahomes did not enter the league with the same perception of a John Elway or even an Andrew Luck, right? As in terms of having that level of prestige and that level of having an aura to him. He was thought of as talented, but a kid who needed some work, right? So he sat behind Alex Smith, but you look at what they've become 5, 6 years later, it's really, really impressive. But yeah, I mean, you look at Andy Reid now with 2 Super Bowl rings under his belt. It's not even a debate. Again, I think he was already in based on that body of work, all the conference championship games in Philadelphia, the fact that he had gone to a Super Bowl there, the longevity
What
there.
gets you in? Like Cowher got in, right? And I'm like, I
And
don't know about that.
right, and that's the thing. I mean, you look at Bill Cowher, Dick Vermeil. I mean, you have some now that you kind of and it's always tough for me because we talk about this a lot in baseball, and I don't want to change the subject, but we always talk about the exclusivity. How exclusive should it be? Should it be a bigger Hall of Fame? Should it be a smaller Hall of Fame? I
They
think
put Zach
historically, and
Thomas
in
in the other
baseball, we've
day.
talked about this
Like,
a lot.
yeah.
They did, but Zach Thomas, if Ray Lewis didn't exist, Zach Thomas I stress might, he might have been maybe not a first ballot, but he might have been a guy who got in 2 years into eligibility if Ray Lewis didn't exist. But Ray Lewis was not just the best of that era, but one of the all-time best defensive players ever.
I'm cloudy on
you
all of it, including the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which I'm fond of, and we've walked
sure
around. Like all of it is so not even subjective. It's political.
it
It's
can be,
grossly
sure.
political. It's grossly political in many cases.
Oh, it absolutely can be. I mean, there's no question. I mean, that's why, as much as again, we've spent more time on this talking about baseball, and I don't want to get into the steroids part of it, but the exclusivity part. Should it be a big Hall of Fame or a small Hall of Fame? And one thing I constantly remind people of is go back and look at who was inducted way back when, and look at the threshold. It's not as high as you think. There are plenty of guys who were inducted decades upon decades ago that if you look at their numbers, you would say, that guy's in the Hall of Fame? Really? And I'm talking about guys that modern casual baseball fans have no idea who they are. So my point with that is, do you want a big Hall of Fame? Do you want a small Hall of Fame? And look, that those words don't mean much on the surface. So when you really to it, it's where it is tough. But that goes back to my point about Andy Reid, where going into Super Bowl 57, I thought he probably already was a Hall of Famer, very likely. Now there's no doubt. There's no doubt about it at this point in time. And uh, they had some outstanding adjustments to really mitigate and neutralize that Philadelphia pass rush. And who knows, maybe the condition of the field, which we haven't talked about, which was a major talking point. In fact, I saw some of the Philadelphia players said that they were even commenting to the Chiefs players during TV timeouts saying how bad the footing was, which knows, maybe that neutralized things at the line of scrimmage a little bit for either team's pass rush, quite frankly. But by and large, what Andy Reid has done, what Kansas City has done over these last 5 years, 5 straight AFC championship games, 2 Super Bowl championships in 4 years, 3 Super Bowl appearances in 4 years. Patrick Mahomes now a multi-time MVP quarterback. Andy Reid's getting in. Now it's just a matter of when are they going to put him in. I mean, that's really what it is. And you mentioned John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin, and throw Pete Carroll in there. I mean, it's you look at those guys. I mean, Belichick will be obviously has been in a slam dunk for 15 years now. But those guys, you look at, they all have a Super Bowl. They've all done it for a long period of time. And again, as you mentioned, with some of the coaches who have gotten in, like a Bill Cowher, for example, was that standard a little bit lower than it had been previously? Maybe. But I'd say this much: if you're talking about a John Harbaugh or a Mike Tomlin, I think those two would be the first to tell you that if they were talking about it in serious terms and you took away the microphone and they were just being truthful about it, they would both say, I'd feel way better about my chances if I got another Super Bowl title. So that's going to be
I would think both of them would say, I got work to do.
Yeah, exactly.
I still got work
so,
to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's the tough part about that. Again, as I said, anyone that's in the AFC, you're dealing with Patrick Mahomes, and he's a young man and he's not going away. And it really is amazing. And this is where I'll give a nod to Brett Veach, their general manager. So much of the talk in the offseason was about the Chiefs being a lesser version of what they had been, with having traded Tyreek Hill, and they made some other roster decisions that not necessarily weaken them, but put them in a position where
that you have to make when you have a $50 million quarterback.
Sure. I mean, they tagged Orlando Brown as opposed to giving him a long-term deal. I know I saw someone make mention that they gave Mahomes a roster bonus he was due rather than doing the restructure thing, which, okay, buys you more time and maybe improves your chances this year, but then that impacts you in future years. So this year there were as much as the Kelsey thing post game was kind of silly in the sense that he's going all WWE saying no one picked us, no one believed in us, but there wasn't as much sentiment going into the season about Kansas City winning it all. I think people were much more on Buffalo. Everyone was talking about the AFC West top to bottom being so tough. Again, no one thought Kansas City was going to be bad. I mean, I think there are a couple people who maybe picked them to miss the playoffs just because they wanted some attention. But the fact of the matter is, this wasn't supposed to be on paper a peak season for them, having traded away their number one wide receiver. And well, when you have Patrick Mahomes,
the Ravens traded away their number one wide receiver. Look at how that turned out.
Yeah. So, replacing their offensive coordinator and not knowing if their quarterback's going to be back. That's where they are right now. But all that aside, Kansas City, they deserve the credit. And it's tough for the AFC when you think about the landscape. It was Tom Brady and Peyton Manning for so long. And then, Brady finally is winding down in 2019. He's eliminated and leaves New England. He goes to Tampa Bay, and this Patrick Mahomes kid steps right in, doesn't miss a beat. And now everyone's chasing Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And we'll continue to in the AFC until someone officially unseats him, which, they don't make it every year. I mean, Cincinnati got over the hump against them last year, but it's just it's that tough. It's that difficult. And the thing that you look at with Mahomes is those cap numbers. And look, I'm guessing at some point he's going to want to go back to the table and get a new deal and new money and fresh money and something that's a little more conducive with what the market's going to be in terms of the cap going up and TV money kicking in. But as it's structured right now, it's pretty team friendly. And in that context, when you look at where the Ravens are with Lamar Jackson and what the heck's going to happen one way or the other, I mean, it's you're looking up at the Chiefs just like everyone else is in the AFC right now, and you might be able to get them once, like Cincinnati did last year, but it's proving to be very, very difficult to unseat them in the way it was for the better part of close to 2 decades with the New England Patriots.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke. You can find him out on the Twitter thing. You can find us both out at Baltimore Positive and WNST AM 1570. Make sure you set the place on your dial. We have some great Radio Row highlights as well as some fresh material as we get an offense coordinator at some point. Orioles open spring training, and I go on the road with Bruce Springsteen. I'm going to say this. I think the Super Bowl MVP was Toradol, and I think Toradol should go to the Disney World, go to Disney. I'm serious. Like, I think Mahomes is going to have trouble standing most of the week, right? Like, after that effort and whatever happened at halftime, that God and science sort of and the doctors worked together at halftime there underneath Glendale while Rihanna was singing Under My Umbrella. But nonetheless, great Super Bowl, great game to talk about, great off season ahead, 8 months of struggles with Lamar Jackson and contracts and drafts and combines. All of that stuff will be there for you and us. And we appreciate y'all listening, staying with us. As always, I am Nestor. He is Luke. We are WNST AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking. Baltimore, positive.